Welcome to Behind the Design from Yaletown to Andmar. This new podcast is going to follow the journey of the new development, Andmar, inspired by Vancouver's Yaletown's history. Andmar blends sustainability, innovation, and luxury. We have so many conversations about how a development like Andmar gets built, what is lease land, and what is it going to be like to live in this thriving community. So let's get started. Welcome back to Behind the Design, Andmar to Yaletown. I'm Jennifer Lee. Today we're talking about transportation in a city. It is so important for any city to have any type of transportation, but we never really think about how it really shapes the places that we live in. We understand many people commute in different ways, either by transit, by car, by electric bike, which is becoming very popular, by regular bike. So we got to have a city that encompasses it all in order for it to thrive. So today I have an expert. We have the General Manager of Engineering Services of City of Vancouver, Lon LaClaire. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good. So I really enjoy transportation because I don't think I've mentioned on this podcast yet, but I used to fly, and I still kind of do, in the sky for many years, reporting on traffic of the Lower Mainland. So I was one of Global's eyes in the sky. And so I totally understand a lot about transportation infrastructure and how it affects a lot of the cities here in the Lower Mainland. So I was like, oh, finally I get to nerd out with somebody about transportation because it's so important. I think a lot of us have the misconception that it's an afterthought, but actually a lot goes into planning, especially when you're developing cities like the one that we're doing this podcast for in Chilliwack, the Andmar development. So to you, what does transportation in general mean to a city?
Well, it's probably one of the most important pieces of a successful city. What's it mean to a city? Without it, you actually don't gain the benefit of a city. So the great thing about a small town, you'll have all the certain things that you can do in a small town. And when you have a big city, you have a lot of things that can only happen in a big city, like big stadiums or, highly specialized medicine or, education systems with strong specialization. And eventually that encompasses a very large area, a metropolitan area. In fact, you could say ours does go all the way up to Chilliwack in this region. But without a good transportation system, you don't gain the benefits of that. In fact, the real value of a city is that you're easily able to do this and that and this thing and have a meeting with someone specialized on this thing and attend an event on this other thing. And you get the benefit of a large city if you have a good transportation system. That's it. Otherwise, if you have a poor transportation system in a big city, you'll kind of end up having to live quite locally, because it will be too frustrating and too difficult to get to those other places. And then you kind of lose the benefit of a big city. You might as well just be in a small town, man.
Yeah, and small town does have their merit, and I think a lot of them want to expand. Like I was telling you before we jumped on this call that I lived at Fort St. John for my radio career, and they do have some transit. It's obviously not as extensive as you get in a bigger city, but some people still love that as a choice. But again, you're dealing with a different climate. You're dealing with a lot of snow. A lot of the roads have to be constantly clean. A lot of people up there, because everything is spread out. It's not all put together in little neighborhoods like we have in a city here where we have, Yaletown, we have Olympic Village, everything's a little bit more accessible, everything's spread out. So it is more of a car culture up there. But when it comes to the case of Andmar, this is something that one of the co-founders, Mark, is really passionate about, is that in Sardis, BC, in Chilliwack, he really wants to give everybody option. If you want to drive, you can drive. If you want to take transit, you can take transit. If you want to do an EVO car share, you can do that. You can ride a bike. You can walk down to your co-working space. And so I think a lot of these smaller cities are starting to adopt that practice of hey, how do we give everybody some value in the way that they want to travel?
And absolutely. And in the influence of a large city too, the smaller cities start to have a lot of the same benefits of the big city. A good example is, say, even Whistler or the Sunshine Coast. So Whistler, transit's quite well used. They have lots of pedestrian-only areas. Sunshine Coast has one extremely successful local transit service because it's linear. The Fraser Valley has a really strong and bright future, I would say, as well, for transit connectivity. And it's because a lot of the people who might be in the city are used to getting around that way anyways. And so when they move out to a place or go out to a place like Chilliwack, the Sunshine Coast or Whistler, they're comfortable with those options. They're comfortable making longer walk trips. They're comfortable, using a bike to get around. And if there's a good transit option for their more distant destinations, they'll even consider that as well. If you know what I mean, so there is this influence that happens.
Yeah, and I like that. And actually, I was talking to someone in another episode. He is a young guy that has bought into Andmar. He's an accountant. He's lived in Chilliwack his whole life. He wanted to be able to get his foot in the door there. But he said what he likes about it is he gets his lifestyle in Chilliwack. He's close to the mountains, everything that he likes to do. But he says he still gets that city feel and he's close enough to Vancouver because he likes to drive over there. So he says, I'm still not far away if I want to hop into Vancouver, but then I get to come back and have that. And I know there have been talks to, nothing concrete yet, but talks to maybe possibly have the West Coast Express head towards Chilliwack one day. And that would definitely be a game changer because not everybody loves to drive either.
Absolutely. In fact, already, the Valley Express is operating almost every hour, every day. And that's all the way out to Chilliwack, connects right into Lougheed SkyTrain station. This is the beginning of building that ridership. I think the ridership south of the Fraser is actually inherently stronger than what the West Coast Express serves on the north shore of the Fraser, just because Chilliwack and Abbotsford and Langley are just way bigger cities than Maple Ridge and Mission. Like they really are. And so getting that service out there, I think it would be an immediate success. And we can see it already with the ridership on the Valley Express kind of in its infancy already doing quite well.
Yeah, and I love it. And because that's something I admire. Like I go to London quite a bit, London, England, not London, Ontario, but London, England. And that's the one thing that I admire because I have friends that live 2 hours out from London, an hour out from London. They're able to live where they want to live. That suits their budget. Not only that suits their lifestyle. Maybe it's close to their family, but they can take a train on an hour, 2 hours, hop into London. They could do work on the train. It's so much easier. And I kind of want to become more like that for us for the Lower Mainland because we do have so many, like Vancouver is great. I live in Vancouver, but we have so many great other hidden gems here in the Lower Mainland.
For sure. I grew up in the Valley, so I'm I was kind of did my high school in Mission, so I'm really familiar with the Valley. But I think that the reason that the transit future for the Fraser Valley is so bright is because it's linear. It's like a lot of large metropolitan cities, like say Edmonton, struggle with the fact that they kind of grow out in all directions. And if you're going to serve these kind of outer destinations, you're kind of going in all the, what I'm saying, it's like 360. For us, it's east, right? It's if you do a really good regional transit system, like a West Coast Express type line, you really need to do one or two really good ones, and they have to connect out to Abbotsford and Chilliwack. So yeah, I'm really bullish on the future of transit in this mega region. I call it that. Up to Whistler, Sunshine Coast. Over to Nanaimo. Now we have Hello Ferries doing service to Nanaimo. For people like that, taking a flight out of YVR is just suddenly so much easier because they hop on the high-speed ferry with their suitcase, get off at the Canada Line. They're on the Canada Line. They're at the airport. They don't have to worry about anyone driving them there or the hassle of trying to get to the airport from these more distant locations.
Yeah, and the one thing that I was shocked about, I was just coming back from the airport and never thought about it because I was leaving New York and a lot of people on my airplane were going to Whistler, but we were landing at like 9 p.m. at night, which is not really late, but I was ready to go to bed after, even though that's a short flight. Like, I was like, I'm out of here. And as I'm leaving the airport, they had a shuttle right there to go to Whistler. And I saw everyone piling out their skis. And I said, that's so smart, something I would have never thought of because I would have been like, let's stay in a hotel overnight if I didn't live here and then go out to Whistler tomorrow. But it's like, no, these people want to go get as much time on the mountain. They hop on their, the bus ride where it's probably about 2 hours or a little bit. They're in their hotel. The next morning they're there in Whistler. So I do feel that we do have a lot of effective forms to get people from the airport. And that's something we do well.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to things like West Coast Express and like expanding, I think people get a little nervous when we're forcing a lot of transit. They don't see the benefits of it because I think a lot of people, and this is something I've talked about on this podcast, is people get worried that we're having a war on their car and we're going to take their car away from them. And we talked a little bit about that on a previous episode, the 15-minute city concept, but we were like, no, we're not trying to take your car away from you. We're trying to give you more options because you remember, not everybody has a car. So what would you say to people that are maybe like a little scared when you're like, oh, transit's awesome, but they want to take my car away from me?
Yeah, no, the only way that in a growing city and region like ours, where you have a chance of not having chronic congestion, is actually to invest in transit. It's so fundamental. If you look at the West Coast Express as an example, which moves a couple thousand people in a single hour into downtown. So if you're moving, say, in that case, maybe 5,000 people an hour, a freeway lane can move about 2,000, right? So you would have to add 2 more freeway lanes. And then what's interesting is that, well, first of all, like that takes a lot of effort to do. If you need to expand the capacity on the West Coast Express, you can just add another train, right? And so suddenly that's another 1,000 people an hour, which is like another traffic lane. In the city itself, it's so extreme that if you look at the busiest section of our SkyTrain system on the Expo line between Broadway Station and Stadium Station, or Main Street Station and Stadium Station, that's moving around 14 to 15,000 people an hour. And Terminal Avenue below is moving about 800, if you know what I mean. Like, so you think about the traffic that's on Terminal Avenue going through Main and Terminal. There is no solution where you could invest in cars to move that many people. It's just not possible. In fact, if I add up all of the streets that head into Vancouver, add them all together, that one train line is moving more people than all the streets added together. And it's easily expandable. Like they're going to be adding 5-car trains to Mark 5s. The new cars are bigger. They can expand it up to 25,000 people an hour. Again, it's an unfathomable amount for people to be moved in cars. Like it's just not possible. And so the only really good way a driving future can also be supported is with good transit. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that without good transit, you can't pull the peaks off. And the peaks are the problem times, right? That kind of rush hour, the crush load, that can just really be managed well on transit. And that's exactly when the service is frequent, and that's usually when it's actually the most attractive to take. In the case of West Coast Express, it's only available on peak hours, so you can't even take it in the off-peak.
I know, and that's something that I wonder if they'll ever change. I understand there's a lot more things that you have to do to make it run longer, but I know a lot of people are like, it would be nice if it ran a little later, because I have friends that are out in Maple Ridge and stuff, and they're like, oh, I would take it instead of taking like an Uber or whatever if it ran later. Yeah.
Yeah, the trick to that is that there needs to be investment in the additional track to kind of untangle it from the freight service that it shares the track with. And the freight service has, seniority. So it has so by adding a couple of extra tracks or even just one extra track, you could introduce service that would be all day, both directions. Right now it's inbound peak in the morning and outbound peak in the afternoon, and only on weekdays. So it's not even on weekends.
So there we go. I feel like that would be a good idea to invest in another track, because especially if eventually it did go to Chilliwack, the people could go party in Vancouver on the train.
Yeah. I was looking at the Brightline project in LA, the one that's going to Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. They're really just running it down the middle of the freeway.
Oh, wow.
And that's a very straightforward way to run a high-speed rail without having to acquire a whole bunch of property along a corridor and untangle yourself from the freight. the kind of the burden that comes with using existing tracks. And in our region, of course, freight is extremely important, being the biggest port in Canada. And all these Canadian goods that move through here, it's really important that those freight lines continue to operate unencumbered.
I never thought about putting it down the freeway, but that is a smart use of space.
And then people would see it go past and they go, you know what? Maybe I should take that. It's like, it'd be like the best advertising ever, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm thinking if you're going from LA to Vegas, you're most likely going to party. So why would you want to take the car anyways? Because I'm sure that's a horrible drive back afterwards. If you had a fun-filled weekend, I'd rather just be sleeping on the train on the way back.
I've taken that drive before. It's traffic hell. And it's just one of those distances too where the flight just doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, because it's so quick.
It's too short. And so it's a lot of effort to get to the airport, like the hour and a half you have to before, and getting to the airport isn't easy. And then you end up with yeah.
Even our flight from Vancouver to Vegas is so quick, but you spend more time at the airport, I feel like. But you're like, okay, we'll do it. But that's a nice thing is we're hearing so many different options. And I know they're also trying to eventually get something from Vancouver to Seattle as well. That's a little bit faster. So all these things are opening up that could help many of the different smaller cities here in Vancouver grow.
And like you say, it's really just giving choice, right? A lot of people, they have a car, of course, but if they see that the traffic's bad and they don't want to drive Highway 1 because they know that it's going to be slow, having an option for some trips to kind of not take the car is fantastic.
It is. And that's the thing is I try to tell people it's like when we're putting more transit, it actually it benefits you. Like I said, if you can get more people on the transit during the peak times, that means there's going to be less cars on the road, which means it's going to be a better flow for people. And it's not about taking away your car. Maybe you use it on the weekend, maybe you use it for groceries, maybe you use it once in a while to go to work. But like I said, I've flown over the lower mainland and I know the pain points, and I could probably tell you exactly what traffic is doing right now because it's the same pattern every day. And that's the thing is, it's like we can't operate like this with the current infrastructure and the amount of cars on the road because you don't move. I hate getting in a car now and going on a highway because I know when the traffic is and I hate being stuck. So I think it's important. There's something else that's kind of coming into play more, and I see them more, and they're a little bit controversial, but I see a lot of people in Vancouver use them. And even in New York, I saw them hauling little trailers for businesses, but electric bikes are becoming a more popular thing. But I think that's something hard, and I kind of want your opinion on this, is where do they go? Because even in New York, they were on the sidewalks. They were sometimes in the bike lane. They had a lot of bike lanes there. Here, we see DoorDash and all them on bikes here and all the delivery services, which is fine, but they're big and they're on the sidewalk. But I'm a regular biker. In the bike lane, I think it's tough too because they go so much faster. But I do think they do play an important role, but where do we stick them?
Yeah, no, I think that's a new consideration that's really affected cycling design, because it's probably, even with the e-cargo bikes, the right place for them is the separated bike lane. The trick is that for the busier ones, that means that we have to design for that extra width. And for the variation in users too, already we're seeing that with e-scooters, with e-bikes versus classic bikes, if you want to call it that. Being able to pass or overtake the person ahead of you is becoming really important. On a long hill, like going up the hill over the Burrard Bridge, the person on a classic bike is it's a slog. But the person on the e-bike is just gonna go right past them. But that in the end, the cycling option for a city like ours ends up being the fastest way of getting around. Mm-hmm. So there's a reason that all those delivery and service providers are switching to scooters and electric bikes, because you're kind of immune to traffic. There's not enough traffic in the bike facilities yet that it feels like traffic, even though they can be busy. They're not going to be queued up at a signal. If the next light signal, you'll get through, unlike all the vehicle traffic. And because your point-to-point ability is actually often more convenient than what transit can provide, the transit option will be quite a bit slower as well. So clearly faster than walking, generally almost always faster than transit, and in almost all cases in our city, faster than driving.
Yeah.
Even like I'm in Central Broadway here, and we have parallel bikeways for Broadway, so we don't really have a bike facility on Broadway, but we have one on 10th Avenue, one block off Broadway, one a couple blocks to the north, and those routes parallel the corridor. But for the cyclist, the advantage is they're local streets, and you only hit a traffic signal at the major street. So you hit a traffic signal at Oak, right? And then, not until Canby or something like that. And then you'll have another signal at Main. If you're going down Broadway, you have a traffic signal on every single intersection. Every single intersection. And, even when there's no traffic at all, that's going to slow you down, right? So the bike routes are inherently quicker, even in a low congestion moment.
Well, I just love the fact that I'm seeing, like I said, in the States, even here at home, more companies using electric bikes opposed to just, I think people thought, oh, this is great for people that maybe need to get somewhere faster, have a harder time of mobility. This is a great option for them. But I love the fact that we're adapting it and seeing more businesses. But as I do see those bigger little caravans on the back, I was wondering, I was like, we're going to have to adapt our lanes because some of the ones I saw in New York, I haven't seen them that big here, are like big. And I was like, how do I get past one of those?
Yeah, no, I think we have a maximum size. So I don't think they could get as big as they could based on our Motor Vehicle Act. But yeah, actually, just, too, like when I first started in engineering way back, before like everything went electronic and online purchasing was a thing, there was still lots of bikes moving around, but they were all couriers. So we licensed cyclist couriers, and really with the advent of email and e-documents, that need sort of melted away, and it's kind of been replaced by this other thing that technology has enabled, which is e-purchase. So whether it's food or products or whatever, people are buying online, whereas in the old days it was just moving around documents. But back then it was worse. Like I remember lots and lots of cyclists on the sidewalks, lots of frustration with the bike couriers, just because there was no bike facilities. Back then they either had to be in the traffic, which is kind of be pretty sketchy, or on the sidewalk. Both of them were not really very good choices. Now, with the network that we've built, there's generally a good choice, and a place to be, and a place where you feel like you belong.
And touching on your background, how did you ever get into transportation? How were you ever like, this is something that I want to do?
I never did. I never did think that I wanted to get into transportation. When I was young, I wanted to be an architect. So I was going to school, studying engineering as a kind of an undergraduate degree before going into architecture school. When I was in university, I took a couple courses in urban design and urban planning, which really intrigued me. And so then I thought, oh no, now I have to switch careers to urban design and planning. But then I kind of did a master's in transportation, and I thought, actually, this is kind of good because as you mentioned, transportation and urban planning and land use are so linked, inextricably linked, that getting my first job here at the City of Vancouver back in '97 in transportation was like my dream come true, because suddenly I was involved in city building the way I want to be. And from the engineering side, which is transportation, but still working hand in hand very closely with the land use planners. So very much a part of the city planning.
Yeah, I find just city planning fascinating, especially after like flying above the city for like 4 years, because you get to see a lot. I always say people need to fly in a helicopter to understand how a city operates, because you'll be able to see the pain points right away. Um, which is kind of fun. With your knowledge and everything, for anyone, like, well, like just we're gonna just play like a little imaginary game right now, but like, what do you feel would make like a really good city?
Well, the foundation of a really good city, well, it's kind of one of those things. If you do an exercise, you ask your friends to kind of like, I don't know, close their eyes and imagine the best city, like, that they enjoyed themselves or would want to go back to. Inevitably, you can forecast that they're thinking of a place that's very walkable. That's actually a joy to walk around. The foundation of a really successful city is a really great walking experience. Like, you enjoy the city, you experience the city on foot. That's how you really get the most out of it. And so cities that do a very good job of the walking piece, that's what I would describe as success. Now, to get that to work, oddly enough, you have to have a lot of great transit. Because if you had nothing but freeways, of course, you can't make anything walkable. So how do you get to these walkable places? That transit and like has got to be the number one way. And so if I look at the great cities of the world, they usually have the most crazy great transit systems, hidden below the surface, often not apparent. Like Paris, probably one of the best cities in the world. And one of the absolute most amazing transit systems in the world.
But I also have to say, like, everyone loves to compare, like, and they're like, oh, Vancouver's, and they're not just meaning Vancouver, like Lower Mainland. They're like, our transit system sucks. They're like, it's not like Paris or London or New York. And I was like, you gotta remember these cities are also very much older than us too. Like, we're very young and we're growing, and these things were established for a long time. So sometimes it's not fair to compare. Like, I love walking London, love walking Paris, love walking New York. They're great places to walk.
Yeah.
But they also have a lot more land too in their city center.
They do. In fact, Vancouver does extremely well on transit if you just look at the facts, at the statistics. In terms of North America, which like is probably the more fair comparison, North American cities, the only cities that beat out Vancouver in performance would be New York, Washington, D.C., Montreal, and Toronto. And like in terms of ridership per capita or even total number of trips on a train and stuff like that, those are the only cities that beat out this region, this metropolitan region. And as you say, they have a huge head start. When Vancouver was celebrating 100 years as a city, Montreal was celebrating 350.
Yeah, they're
Like,
a little older.
because of the way the continent was settled with colonization, it started in the east, right? And it took a long time to get west. And so they have a huge head start. And you look at the legacy systems in a city like New York, hundreds of years of kind of like background. And here we're relatively new to the game. And yet still, we just recently, just have like through this pandemic period and kind of post, just overtook Chicago and Boston, for transit. And it just seems like, how's that possible? And we're talking total ridership. Like on the Chicago L, our SkyTrain moves more people. It's
Well,
kind
I
of
didn't expect that.
yeah, we had already passed, San Francisco's BART system, which is 3 times that size. Like, just in terms of like kilometers, the coverage and the size of the trains. But we have more ridership in our kind of relatively small system compared to them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things are changing too. Like, I know a lot of younger people that um are like in their teens and they're not getting their driver's licenses and they're not wanting to own a car. So I think, we got to evolve with that, or they're not going to have a place to go because they won't even be able to rent an Evo because they won't have a license. But, it's really nice to see that our SkyTrain system is picking up in popularity. So is the West Coast Express, some of our longer haul buses, because really this is so important for not just Vancouver, all the cities around it, because they are thriving. like Chilliwack. And I know that's one of Mark's big ambitions. Like I said, he really wants to make sure it's trans accessible. He really wants to make sure there's a ton of options. He bikes to work all the time. That's what he likes to do. So it's something that it's really nice to see that it's happening everywhere. And as we continue to grow, and I know that SkyTrain's expanding, it's expanding right out your window. And then eventually, hopefully we'll get to UBC. Hopefully we'll get to Chilliwack. Hopefully we'll get further into Surrey and Langley. But again, it takes time. We're not that old.
But like you say, actually, that growing population of those that chose not to own a car or even choose not to get a driver's license, they do want to go to these places.
They do.
You know, they do. Whether it's for family or friends where they want to move there, you know, they like more and more that market is growing, you know, for the transit option.
Yeah, and I love that. And so there's so many great places to live here in the Lower Mainland, and more options are coming, and that's great. So thank you so much, Lon, for coming onto the podcast today. I feel like I could talk to you for forever about transportation, but like I said, I'm a little nerdy about it. So I know it's a big part of how our cities operate, and something that we don't think about enough is transportation infrastructure. And I said that's not just transit, that's everything. How are cars moving down a highway, bikes, you know, more people bike than ever now because we do have options for longer haul if you want an electric bike. Way products are moving are not just trucks. It's being moved by people on bicycles. So it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, it is. Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on Behind the Design from Yaletown to Andmar. We've explored the history, innovation, and sustainability that makes Andmar more than just a community. It's a place where life, business, and connection thrive. If you've been inspired by this podcast, we'd love your support. Follow the podcast, rate it, and leave a review to help others discover what makes Andmar so special. Till next time.